Veltar pressed her six-fingered hand against the cold metal wall and tried to stay quiet. Her blue skin had turned pale with fear, and her large eyes watched the security screen with growing horror. The peaceful research station she had called home for 3 years was now a nightmare. The attack had come without warning. One moment, the crew of Harmony's light station was studying the strange floating creatures in the gas giant's atmosphere below. The next moment, dark ships appeared from nowhere. These ships looked wrong. They seemed alive, with surfaces that pulsed like beating hearts. The creatures inside these ships were called the Scourge. Veltar had heard whispers about them in the outer colonies, but she thought they were just scary stories. Now she knew the truth was much worse than any story. The Scourge did not kill their victims quickly. They kept them alive and used their bodies to build more ships. Veltar watched through hidden cameras as her friends and colleagues were dragged into conversion chambers. The machine slowly changed living beings into parts of the ships. The worst part was that the victims stayed awake during the whole process. Dr. Kelm, who had taught Veltar about star biology, was now being turned into a living computer. His screams echoed through the station's corridors. Engineer Zora, who always shared her lunch with everyone, was becoming part of a weapon system. Her eyes still moved and looked around, but her body was no longer her own. Veltar's people, the Zephyrians, were a peaceful species. They had never fought wars. Their technology was built for research and exploration, not fighting. The station's defense systems were meant to stop asteroids, not warships. The Scourge had broken through their shields in minutes. The alien invaders moved through the station like they owned it. They were tall and thin, with gray skin that looked like metal. Where their faces should be, they had clusters of red lights. They did not speak with words. Instead, they made clicking sounds that seemed to come from inside their heads. Veltar knew she was the only one left hiding. Everyone else was either captured or dead. She had to do something. But what could one scientist do against an entire fleet? Then she remembered the experimental transmitter in the main lab. It was designed to send messages across vast distances using quantum energy. The project was still being tested, but it might work. If she could reach it, she could send a distress call to other worlds. Moving carefully through the maintenance tunnels, Veltar made her way toward the lab. The sounds of the conversion process filled the air around her. Metal grinding against bone, electronic beeps counting down lives, the wet sounds of organic matter being reshaped. The lab was empty when she reached it. The Scourge had not bothered to guard it because they thought all resistance was finished. Veltar's hands shook as she powered up the quantum transmitter. She had helped build this machine, but she had never used it for real. The device hummed to life, its crystals glowing with strange energy. Veltar set it to broadcast on all known frequencies. Every species in this part of the galaxy would hear her message, if the signal was strong enough. She took a deep breath and began to speak. "This is Chief Science Officer Veltar of the research station Harmony's Light. We are under attack by the Scourge. They are not killing us. They are keeping us alive and using our bodies to build their ships. We have children here, families. Please, any species that receives this message, help us. We are in the Kepler 442 system, orbiting the 4th planet." Her voice broke as she continued. "They are turning us into machines while we are still conscious. Dr. Kelm is still aware, but his body is now part of their navigation system. Engineer Zora's mind is trapped inside a weapon. If anyone can hear this, please hurry. We do not have much time left." The transmitter showed that her message was broadcasting across space. It would take time to reach other star systems, but at least it was traveling. Veltar just hoped someone would care enough to respond. As she finished the transmission, she heard footsteps in the corridor outside. The Scourge had found her. She quickly shut down the transmitter and hid behind a large research table. 3 of the gray beings entered the lab. Their red lights swept back and forth as they searched for her. One of them stopped near her hiding place. It made clicking sounds, and the others answered. They were communicating, but Veltar could not understand their language. She held her breath and tried not to move. After what felt like hours, the Scourge left the lab. Veltar waited until she was sure they were gone, then crept back to the transmitter. She needed to keep sending the message in case the first one did not get through. Meanwhile, far across space, her desperate call was traveling toward a small yellow star. Around that star orbited a blue and green planet. The beings who lived on this world called it Earth. They called themselves humans. Deep space monitoring stations around Earth detected the quantum signal. Computers translated the alien language and sent the message to military headquarters. Admiral Sarah Chen was in her office when the translation arrived on her desk. Chen was a veteran of humanity's worst wars. She had fought against rebel colonies and space pirates. She thought she had seen every kind of cruelty that thinking beings could create. But as she read Veltar's message, her blood ran cold. Using living beings as building materials while keeping them conscious was beyond evil. It was something that violated every principle of civilized behavior. The Admiral had spent her career protecting human colonies from threats. Now she was reading about aliens who needed the same protection. Chen walked to her window and looked out at Earth's blue oceans. Humanity had been isolated from the rest of the galaxy for good reasons. Other species considered humans too violent, too unpredictable. They had quarantined Earth to keep humanity away from peaceful worlds, but sometimes the Admiral thought the galaxy needed a little violence. She pressed a button on her desk. "Get me the fleet command," she said into her communicator. "Authorization code Alpha 77. We have a situation." Within minutes, Chen was speaking to the highest levels of Earth's military. The debate was short. Every human officer who heard the message had the same reaction. It did not matter that these aliens were strangers. It did not matter that helping them might cause political problems with the galactic government. Someone was hurting innocent people. That was all humans needed to know. "Prep the expeditionary fleet," Admiral Chen ordered. "Full battle configuration. We are going to the Kepler 442 system, and we are going to end this." As alarms sounded across human space, thousands of men and women rushed to their battle stations. They did not know what they would find when they reached the alien research station. They only knew that someone had asked for help, and humans always answered that call. In the depths of space, 50 of humanity's most powerful warships began their journey toward a distant star. Each ship carried enough firepower to destroy a small moon. More importantly, each ship carried humans who had decided that the scourge needed to be stopped. Back on Harmony's light station, Veltar continued hiding in the shadows. She did not know if her message had reached anyone. She did not know if help was coming. All she could do was wait and hope that somewhere in the vast galaxy, someone had heard her cry for help and decided to care. 24 hours after Veltar sent her desperate message, space around Harmony's light station began to change. The darkness between the stars seemed to tear open like fabric. From these rips in space came ships unlike anything the Scourge had ever seen. The human fleet emerged from jump space with the fury of a storm. 50 massive warships appeared in perfect formation, their hulls painted with fierce images and strange symbols. Each ship bristled with weapons that had been designed for one purpose: total destruction of the enemy. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of her flagship, the UES Righteous Fury. Through the main viewing screen, she could see the alien research station in the distance. Strange biomechanical ships surrounded it like parasites feeding on a dying host. Her jaw tightened as she counted at least 30 Scourge vessels. "Admiral," reported Lieutenant Torres from the communication station, "we are receiving multiple signals from the research station. The aliens are still converting the captives." Chen closed her eyes for a moment. They were not too late, but they were running out of time. "All ships, battle stations. Target the enemy vessels, but be careful not to hit the research station. We have people to save." The Scourge fleet detected the human ships immediately. Their biomechanical minds tried to process what they were seeing. These new vessels did not match any known design in their databases. The technology seemed primitive compared to what advanced species normally used. Instead of energy shields, the human ships had thick armor plating. Instead of elegant beam weapons, they carried crude kinetic cannons that fired metal projectiles. But there was something about these ships that made the Scourge pause. They radiated an aura of controlled violence that the hive mind found disturbing. The Scourge had conquered hundreds of worlds, but they had never faced beings who seemed eager for battle. Scourge Prime Node Designation 7, the collective consciousness commanding the harvesting operation, sent a communication to the human fleet. The message was translated by the human computers. "Unknown vessels, you are interfering with a sanctioned harvesting operation. Withdraw immediately or face conversion." Admiral Chen smiled grimly as she heard the translation. She activated the fleet-wide communication system and responded in a voice that carried across all frequencies. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Expeditionary Fleet. You have exactly 60 seconds to release your captives and surrender. After that, we will show you why Earth is quarantined from the rest of the galaxy." The Scourge mind could not understand the human response. These beings were vastly outnumbered. Their technology appeared inferior. Yet they were issuing demands as if they held the superior position. It made no logical sense. What the Scourge did not understand was that humans had spent millions of years as predators on a world where everything tried to kill them. They had evolved to fight creatures larger and stronger than themselves. Fear was not something that stopped humans. It was something that made them more dangerous. Inside the research station, Veltar was still hiding in the maintenance areas when she detected the new ships on her scanner. At first, she thought more Scourge vessels had arrived. Then she saw the energy signatures and realized these ships were completely different. She managed to access the station's external cameras and got her first look at the human fleet. The ships were massive and angular, covered with weapons and armor. But what struck her most were the images painted on their hulls. Fierce animals showing their teeth. Symbols that seemed to promise violence to anyone who threatened the innocent. One of the human ships was broadcasting on multiple frequencies. Veltar's translator picked up the signal and she heard a female voice speaking in calm, controlled tones. "Attention survivors on the research station. This is Captain Maria Santos of the UES Stormbringer. We are here to help you. Stay hidden and stay alive. We are coming for you." Veltar felt something she had not experienced since the attack began. Hope. These strangers from across the galaxy had heard her call and come to help. She did not know what humans were, but their ships looked like they were built for war. The 60 seconds Admiral Chen had given the Scourge passed quickly. When no response came, she gave the order that would change galactic history. "All ships, open fire. Show them what humans do to those who hurt innocent people." The human fleet unleashed a barrage of weapons fire that lit up the darkness of space. Kinetic rounds traveling at incredible speeds smashed into Scourge bioships. Missiles with nuclear warheads turned alien vessels into expanding clouds of gas and debris. Energy beams designed to cut through asteroid metal sliced Scourge ships in half. But the humans were not just fighting to destroy. They were fighting with a controlled fury that the Scourge mind found impossible to understand. The biomechanical creatures had expected clean, efficient warfare. Instead, they faced beings who took the suffering of strangers personally. Captain Santos led the first boarding party onto the research station. She and her Marines moved through the corridors with practiced efficiency, their weapons ready for any threat. They wore armor that was painted with bright colors and decorated with personal symbols. To the Scourge, this seemed illogical. Why would warriors make themselves easy targets? The answer came when the Marines encountered their first group of Scourge drones. The aliens expected the humans to take cover and fight defensively. Instead, the Marines charged forward with battle cries that echoed through the station. They fought with a combination of advanced tactics and primitive fury that overwhelmed the Scourge defenses. Veltar watched from her hiding place as the human soldiers moved past her position. One of them stopped and looked directly at her hiding spot. For a moment she was terrified. Then the human removed his helmet, revealing a face that was alien but somehow kind. "Are you hurt?" the human asked in her language. His translator device had learned Zephyrian from her original distress call. "Do you need medical attention?" Veltar was amazed. This warrior, who had just fought his way through deadly enemies, was asking about her well-being. She crawled out of her hiding place and saw that the human was tall and strong, with skin that was darker than hers and eyes that seemed to see everything. "I am Veltar," she said in broken human language. "I sent the message." The human's face changed when he heard this. He spoke into his communication device. "Captain Santos, I found her. I found the one who called for help." Captain Santos arrived within minutes. She was a woman with short gray hair and scars on her face that spoke of many battles. But when she looked at Veltar, her expression was gentle. "We heard your call," Santos said. "We came as fast as we could. How many of your people are still alive?" Veltar explained about the conversion chambers and the horrible fate of her colleagues. She expected the humans to be shocked or disgusted. Instead, she saw something in their eyes that made her step back. It was anger, but it was controlled and focused. It was the anger of protectors who had found those they were meant to protect. "Show us where they are," Captain Santos said. "We are going to get your people back." As the human boarding parties moved deeper into the station, the Scourge began to realize they had made a terrible mistake. These beings from the quarantined world were not like other species. They did not fight for territory or resources. They fought because they believed that hurting innocent people was wrong. The Scourge had encountered thousands of species across the galaxy. Some had surrendered immediately. Others had fought bravely before being overwhelmed. But none had fought with the focused intensity of these humans. It was as if the strangers' suffering had become personal to them. Outside the station, the space battle continued. Human ships moved in formations that seemed chaotic, but were actually carefully planned. They used tactics that no civilized species would consider, attacking from multiple directions at once and focusing their fire on single targets until those targets were completely destroyed. The Scourge tried to adapt, but their biomechanical minds were not designed for this type of warfare. They were used to fighting defensive battles against species that valued their own lives above all else. Humans seemed willing to sacrifice everything to protect people they had never met. Admiral Chen watched the battle from her command bridge and felt a grim satisfaction. The Scourge had thought they could terrorize innocent beings without consequences. They were learning that some species in the galaxy would not tolerate such cruelty. "All ships, continue the assault," she ordered. "No Scourge vessel leaves this system. They need to understand that there are lines that cannot be crossed." The message was clear. Humanity had arrived, and the galaxy was about to learn what happened when someone called Earth's children for help. Admiral Chen studied the tactical display in front of her and frowned. The Scourge fleet was fighting differently than she expected. Their bioships moved in predictable patterns, as if they had never faced real military opposition before. It was becoming clear that these creatures had spent their existence hunting defenseless prey. "Admiral," reported Commander Hayes from the intelligence station, "we have been monitoring Scourge communications. They seem confused by our tactics. Their database has no record of our species." Chen nodded grimly. "They have been bullying peaceful civilizations for so long, they forgot what real predators look like." "What about our boarding operations?" Captain Santos reports that her teams have secured 3 levels of the research station. "They have found the conversion chambers." Hayes paused, his face growing dark. "Admiral, what they are doing to these people is worse than we thought." Chen closed her eyes for a moment. She had seen the preliminary reports about the Scourge conversion process, but she knew the reality would be even more horrible. "How many survivors have we recovered?" 200 so far, but many of them are partially converted. Our medical teams are trying to reverse the process, but some of the changes cannot be undone." The Admiral felt anger building in her chest. She had fought in many wars, but this was different. The Scourge were not soldiers fighting for their beliefs or their people. They were predators who enjoyed causing suffering. On the research station, Veltar followed Captain Santos through corridors that had once been filled with laughter and scientific discovery. Now they echoed with the sounds of human soldiers fighting to save people they had never met. She watched in amazement as the Marines worked together with perfect coordination. "Your people fight very well together," Veltar observed as they moved toward the main conversion chamber. Santos smiled grimly. "We have had a lot of practice. Earth is not a peaceful world. We learned to work as a team or we died." They reached the conversion chamber and Veltar felt sick. Dozens of her colleagues were trapped in biomechanical devices that were slowly changing their bodies into ship components. But the worst part was their eyes. They were still aware, still conscious of what was happening to them. Dr. Kelm saw them approaching and tried to speak, but his vocal cords had been replaced with electronic systems. Only clicking sounds came out. His eyes pleaded for help. "Can you save them?" Veltar asked. Santos was already calling for her medical team. "We will try everything we can. No one gets left behind." Human medics arrived within minutes carrying equipment that looked advanced even by galactic standards. They began working on the conversion devices, trying to free the trapped Zephyrians without killing them. Dr. Chen, the chief medical officer, examined Dr. Kelm's biomechanical interfaces. "This is incredibly sophisticated," she said, "but it is designed to be permanent. We might be able to free some of them, but others—" "Do whatever you can," Santos ordered. These people called for help. We do not abandon those who ask for our protection. Veltar was struck by the human attitude. In her experience, most species would calculate the cost of rescue operations. They would decide if the effort was worth the resources. But these humans seemed to consider every life equally valuable, even lives that belonged to aliens they had never met. As the medical teams worked, the space battle continued outside. The Scourge were discovering that human warfare was unlike anything in their experience. Instead of trying to minimize casualties, the humans seemed determined to completely destroy their enemy. Scourge Prime Node Designation 7 analyzed the human fighting patterns and found them disturbing. These beings used tactics that were wasteful and inefficient. They spent enormous amounts of energy to ensure that Scourge vessels were not just defeated, but completely annihilated. The hive mind tried to understand the human motivation. Normally, species fought for resources or territory, but these humans seemed to be fighting purely for revenge. They were not trying to capture Scourge technology or claim the research station for themselves. They were simply trying to kill every Scourge in the system. This kind of warfare made no logical sense to the biomechanical consciousness. Resources were finite, energy was precious, yet the humans were spending both freely, as if the complete destruction of the Scourge was worth any cost. The Prime Node decided to try a different approach. It ordered its ships to broadcast images from the conversion chambers, showing the human rescue teams exactly what had been done to the research station crew. This tactic had worked before. Most species became discouraged when they saw the extent of Scourge cruelty. The reaction was not what the Prime Node expected. On the bridge of the Righteous Fury, Admiral Chen watched the Scourge broadcast and felt something cold settle in her stomach. The images showed Zephyrians who had been turned into living computers, their minds trapped in biomechanical prisons, children who had been converted into organic components for Scourge weapon systems. They are trying to intimidate us, reported Commander Hayes. They want us to see what they are capable of doing. Chen stared at the screen for a long moment. Then she activated the fleet communication system. All ships, you have seen what these creatures do to innocent people. Remember those images. Remember why we are here. No Scourge ship leaves this system alive. No exceptions. Instead of discouraging the humans, the broadcast had the opposite effect. The fleet's attack intensified. Ships that had been fighting with professional efficiency now fought with controlled fury. The humans were no longer just trying to rescue the research station. They were trying to ensure that the Scourge could never hurt anyone again. Veltar watched this transformation from the medical bay where she was helping tend to rescued Zephyrians. The human medics worked with incredible skill and compassion, treating alien patients as carefully as they would treat their own people, but she could hear the sounds of battle echoing through the station. And she knew that the same humans who were saving lives were also taking them. I do not understand your people, she said to Dr. Chen as they worked on Dr. Kelm's conversion. You are so gentle with us, but so violent with the Scourge. Dr. Chen paused in her work and looked at Veltar with tired eyes. We learned a long time ago that sometimes the only way to protect innocent people is to become monsters ourselves. We choose who deserves our protection and who deserves our fury. But how do you decide? It is simple, Dr. Chen replied. Those who hurt children and defenseless people get no mercy from us. Those who need protection get everything we have to give. As if to prove her point, a Scourge drone managed to break through the human defenses and entered the medical bay. Veltar screamed and dove for cover. But before the alien creature could harm anyone, 3 human Marines appeared and destroyed it with swift, brutal efficiency. The lead Marine checked to make sure no one was hurt, then returned to his patrol as if nothing had happened. To him, protecting the medical bay was just part of his job. Outside the station, the space battle was turning into a slaughter. The Scourge bioships were designed for harvesting operations, not military combat. They had thick hulls and powerful weapons, but they lacked the speed and maneuverability to fight proper warships. The human fleet moved like a pack of wolves, surrounding individual Scourge vessels and destroying them one by one. They used missiles, energy weapons, and kinetic rounds with deadly efficiency, but they also used something else that the Scourge had never encountered: psychological warfare. Human ships broadcast the screams of Scourge victims across all frequencies. They played recordings of children crying for their parents. They transmitted images of the conversion chambers in brutal detail. The goal was not just to defeat the Scourge, but to make them suffer for what they had done. For the first time in their species' history, the Scourge began to feel something they had never experienced: fear. The biomechanical hive mind realized that they had awakened something terrible. These humans were not just another species to be harvested. They were apex predators who had decided that the Scourge represented a threat to innocent life. Prime Node Designation 7 tried to analyze human behavior patterns and found them incomprehensible. These beings fought with a level of intensity that suggested personal investment in the outcome. But they had no personal connection to the Zephyrians. They had never met these aliens before today. The only logical conclusion was that humans considered all innocent life to be under their protection. They had appointed themselves as guardians of the weak, regardless of species or origin. This was a concept that the Scourge mind found impossible to process. As the battle continued, more human ships arrived from across Terran space. Mining vessels from the asteroid belt came loaded with massive excavation charges. Military engineers brought experimental weapons that had never been tested in real combat. Even civilian ships joined the fight, their cargo holds filled with supplies for the rescue operation. Admiral Chen watched the growing fleet with satisfaction. Humanity had answered the call for help with overwhelming force. The message would be clear to any species that might consider following the Scourge's example. Humans protected their own, and they had decided that everyone who needed protection was their own. The fleeing Scourge ships had barely reached the edge of the star system when more human vessels dropped out of jump space. These were not the sleek warships of the First Fleet. They were massive industrial ships with hulls scarred by years of dangerous work. Mining vessels from the asteroid belt, their holds now filled with planet cracker missiles. Engineering ships from the outer colonies carrying weapons that violated multiple galactic treaties. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the Righteous Fury and watched the new arrivals with grim satisfaction. Word of the Scourge atrocity had spread across human space faster than official communications could travel. Civilian crews had abandoned their jobs and volunteered for combat duty. Military reserves had activated themselves without waiting for orders. "Admiral," reported Commander Hayes, "we now have over 200 ships in the system. The Mining Guild is requesting permission to use their deep core charges against the remaining Scourge vessels." Chen considered this for a moment. Deep core charges were designed to split asteroids the size of mountains. Using them against bioships would be complete overkill. It would also send a very clear message to any species that might be watching. "Permission granted," she said. "Tell them to make it spectacular." On the research station, Veltar was helping evacuate the last of the survivors when she felt the entire structure shake. Through the observation windows, she could see bright flashes of light as human weapons destroyed the remaining Scourge ships. The violence was overwhelming, but she found herself feeling grateful for these strange protectors. Dr. Chen approached her with a medical scanner. "We need to check you for Scourge biocontamination," she explained. "Some of their technology can leave traces that continue to function even after the host is rescued." As the human doctor ran the scanner over her body, Veltar asked the question that had been bothering her since the humans arrived. "Why did your people come? We are strangers to you. Our species has never even met before today." Dr. Chen paused in her work and looked at Veltar with serious eyes. "Do you have children?" she asked. "Yes, 2 daughters. They are back on our home world." "Then you understand. When we heard your message, we thought about our own children. We thought about how we would feel if they were trapped and afraid, calling for help. It did not matter that you were aliens. You were someone's children." The simplicity of the explanation struck Veltar like a physical blow. These humans had traveled across space and risked their lives because they could imagine her fear and pain. They had made her suffering personal to them. Meanwhile, in the depths of space, the Scourge Prime Node was experiencing something unprecedented: desperation. The biomechanical consciousness had never faced complete extinction before. In thousands of years of expansion, no species had been able to threaten the Scourge's survival. The Prime Node tried to contact the human fleet with an offer of negotiation. The message was transmitted on all frequencies. "Human fleet, we propose a cessation of hostilities. We will return all captured beings and withdraw from this system. In exchange, you will allow our remaining ships to depart." The response came from Admiral Chen herself. "You do not get to negotiate. You had your chance to leave when we first arrived. Now you get to face the consequences of your actions." The prime node could not understand this response. Efficient beings should accept a solution that achieved their primary objectives with minimal resource expenditure. The humans had rescued the research station and driven off the attackers. Continuing the battle served no logical purpose, but humans did not always operate on pure logic. They operated on principles that sometimes made them behave in ways that seemed wasteful or inefficient. One of those principles was that monsters who hurt children did not get second chances. The final battle took place in the shadow of Harmony's light station. The remaining Scourge bioships formed a defensive formation around their command vessel, hoping to protect the prime node long enough for it to escape to jump distance. The human fleet approached in a formation that military historians would later call the Hammer. Fast attack ships moved in from multiple directions, forcing the Scourge vessels to split their attention. Behind them came the heavy cruisers, their main guns charging for maximum impact, and bringing up the rear were the mining ships, their planet cracker missiles ready to finish anything that survived the initial assault. Captain Santos led a boarding party onto the Scourge command ship, determined to capture the prime node alive. She wanted answers about how many other species the Scourge had terrorized. She wanted to know how many innocent beings had suffered the same fate as the Zephyrians. The command ship's interior was a nightmare of organic technology and biomechanical horror. The walls pulsed with veins that carried nutrients to living computer systems. The floors were covered with nerve clusters that transmitted information throughout the ship. Everything was alive and everything was aware. Santos and her Marines fought their way through Scourge defenders that seemed more desperate than before. The biomechanical creatures were no longer fighting with cold efficiency. They were fighting with something that almost looked like panic. When the Marines reached the command center, they found the prime node connected to the ship's central nervous system by hundreds of organic cables. The collective consciousness appeared as a tall, thin figure with translucent skin that showed the biomechanical implants underneath. Human leader. The prime node spoke through organic speakers that converted its thoughts into words. You have demonstrated superior firepower. We acknowledge your dominance. State your terms for our survival. Santos removed her helmet and looked directly at the creature that had caused so much suffering. My terms are simple. You do not get to survive. You hurt innocent people for fun. That means you do not get to exist anymore. The prime node's biomechanical mind struggled to process this statement. But we offer valuable technology. We possess knowledge of hundreds of star systems. We can provide information about other hostile species. We do not want your technology, Santos replied. We do not want your knowledge. We want you gone from this universe. For the first time in its existence, the prime node experienced true fear. These humans were not interested in conquest or profit. They were not motivated by practical considerations. They were driven by something the Scourge mind could not comprehend: moral outrage. The biomechanical consciousness tried one last desperate gambit. It activated the ship's self-destruct sequence, hoping to take the human boarding party with it. But Santos had anticipated this move. Her Marines had already placed charges throughout the command ship's critical systems. You want to blow up your ship? Santos asked with a cold smile. Let us help you with that. The human charges detonated first, severing the prime node's connection to the ship's systems and trapping the collective consciousness in its biomechanical shell. Santos and her team evacuated through emergency portals just as the Scourge self-destruct triggered. The command ship's destruction was visible from across the star system. It lit up the darkness of space like a brief new star, marking the end of the Scourge presence in this part of the galaxy. Admiral Chen watched the explosion from her command bridge and felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. The Scourge were finished, but the cost had been enormous. Hundreds of innocent beings had suffered horribly before the humans could save them. Admiral, reported Commander Hayes, we are detecting no remaining Scourge vessels in the system. All bioships have been destroyed or disabled. What about survivors from their ships? None, Admiral. The biomechanical technology does not allow for individual survival when the hive mind is destroyed. When we killed the prime node, we killed them all. Chen nodded grimly. It was probably for the best. The Scourge had made their choice when they decided to torture innocent beings for their own purposes. Now they had to live with the consequences of that choice. Or rather, they had to die with those consequences. On the research station, Veltar was helping load the last of the survivors onto human medical ships when she received word that the battle was over. The Scourge fleet had been completely destroyed. No enemy vessels had escaped to threaten other worlds. She found herself crying not from sadness but from relief. Her people were safe. The monsters were gone. And somewhere in the galaxy, there were humans who had decided that protecting innocent life was worth any cost. Dr. Chen found her in the observation lounge, looking out at the human fleet. "How are you feeling?" the human medic asked. "Grateful," Veltar replied, "and confused. Your people came so far to help us. You risked your lives for strangers. Many species would consider that wasteful." Dr. Chen sat down beside her and followed her gaze to the stars. "Maybe it is wasteful, but it is who we are. We learned a long time ago that the universe can be a cruel place. Someone has to stand up for those who cannot protect themselves. And you appointed yourselves to do that job. Someone had to. We were available." As the human fleet prepared to escort the survivors back to Zephyrian space, word of the battle was already spreading across the galaxy. The quarantined species from the Death World had emerged to protect innocent life. The monsters had become guardians. The question now was, what would the rest of the galaxy do with that knowledge? 3 weeks after the battle, Veltar stood in the rebuilt medical bay of Harmony's light station and watched human doctors work alongside Zephyrian medics to help the survivors. The cooperation between the two species was remarkable. Despite their different biologies and cultures, they had found ways to share knowledge and techniques. Dr. Chen approached her with a data pad showing the recovery statistics. "We have managed to reverse the conversion process for about 60% of the victims," she reported. "The others will need long-term care, but they will survive." Veltar looked at the numbers and felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Her friend Dr. Kelm was among those who could not be fully restored. His mind was intact, but much of his body remained biomechanical. He would never be the same, but he was alive and aware. "Your people have given us so much," Veltar said. "Medical technology, defensive systems, friendship. What can we offer in return?" Dr. Chen smiled and pointed to a group of human and Zephyrian children playing together in the recreation area. "You already gave us something precious. You trusted us enough to call for help. That trust is worth more than any technology." The scene was being watched with great interest by representatives from across the galaxy. Word of the human intervention had spread rapidly through diplomatic channels. The same Galactic Council that had quarantined Earth as too dangerous for contact was now trying to understand what these Deathworlders represented. Ambassador Krelth of the Galactic Council sat in his ship's observation lounge, reviewing reports from the Kepler 442 system. The information was disturbing for reasons he could not quite identify. The humans had responded to a distress call from an unknown species with overwhelming military force. They had crossed vast distances and risked their lives for beings they had never met. This behavior made no sense from a strategic perspective. The Zephyrians offered no significant resources or technology. They controlled no important trade routes. There was no logical reason for humanity to get involved in their affairs. Yet the humans had not only intervened, they had completely annihilated the Scourge presence in the region. They had spent enormous resources to ensure that the biomechanical species could never threaten innocent life again. It was wasteful, inefficient, and completely irrational. It was also terrifying to species that had spent centuries avoiding conflict. "Ambassador," his aide reported, "we are receiving a transmission from the human fleet." The message was from Admiral Chen herself. Her image appeared on the main screen, showing a middle-aged woman with gray hair and eyes that seemed to see everything. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who had made difficult decisions and accepted their consequences. "Greetings, Ambassador Krelth. I understand you represent the Galactic Council. I have a message for your government and any other species that might be listening." Chen paused and looked directly into the camera. "What happened here will happen again if necessary. The Scourge chose to torture innocent beings for their own purposes. They learned what humans do to monsters. Any species that threatens defenseless people will receive the same treatment." The Admiral's expression softened slightly. "But any species that needs protection will also receive our help. We do not care about your politics or your trade agreements. We care about whether you hurt children and defenseless people. Choose your actions accordingly." The transmission ended, leaving Ambassador Krelth staring at a blank screen. The human message was clear and disturbing. Earth's children had appointed themselves as protectors of galactic civilization. They were offering their protection to anyone who needed it, but they were also promising destruction to anyone who preyed on the innocent. The implications were staggering. The galaxy's military balance had just changed completely. Species that had relied on the threat of violence to maintain their power now faced the possibility of human intervention. Predator races that had terrorized weaker civilizations would now have to consider whether their actions might summon the Deathworld fleet. On Earth itself, the news of the Kepler 442 intervention had been received with overwhelming public support. Humans across the solar system felt proud that their military had responded to a call for help from strangers. The idea that innocent aliens had been tortured and converted into biomechanical slaves had enraged the entire species. President Martinez addressed the United Earth Assembly with words that would be remembered for generations. Today, humanity took its place as a guardian of innocent life throughout the galaxy. We did not ask for this responsibility, but we will not turn away from it. Any being that calls for help will find that Earth answers. The speech was broadcast across human space and beyond. Within hours, it was being translated into hundreds of alien languages. Some species heard it as a promise of protection. Others heard it as a threat to their way of life. Back on Harmony's light station, Veltar was preparing for her return to Zephyrian space when Captain Santos found her in the observation lounge. The human officer looked tired but satisfied. Her mission had been successful, but the cost had been high. "I wanted to thank you before you left," Santos said, sitting down beside the alien scientist. "Your message saved not just your people, but probably thousands of others. The Scourge will never hurt anyone again." Veltar turned to look at the human captain with curious eyes. "I have been thinking about what happened here. Your people traveled across space to save strangers. You risked your lives for beings you had never met. Why do humans do this?" Santos was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. "Do you know what the word Ubuntu means?" she finally asked. "No. It is an old human concept. It means I am because we are. It means that your suffering becomes my suffering. Your pain becomes my pain. When we heard your message, we did not hear a stranger calling for help. We heard family. But we are not the same species. We evolved on different worlds." Santos smiled and pointed to the mixed group of human and Zephyrian children playing in the recreation area. "Look at them. Do you see humans and aliens? Or do you see children playing together?" Veltar watched the scene and realized that she saw only children. Their species did not matter. Their differences in appearance were irrelevant. They were young beings learning about the universe together. "I think I understand," she said softly. "You see all innocent life as worth protecting." "Exactly. And we see all monsters as needing to be stopped." As their conversation continued, reports were coming in from across the galaxy. The news of human intervention had reached every major civilization. Diplomatic channels were buzzing with discussions about what this meant for galactic politics. Some species were horrified by the humans' capacity for violence. The complete annihilation of the Scourge fleet had been broadcast across known space. It served as a warning to any civilization that might consider following the Scourge's example. Other species were intrigued by the human offer of protection. Smaller worlds that had lived in fear of stronger neighbors began to wonder if they could call upon Earth for help. The idea of having the Deathworld fleet as protectors was both comforting and terrifying. The Galactic Council found itself in an impossible position. They had quarantined Earth specifically to keep humans away from peaceful civilizations. Now those same humans had proven that they were willing to sacrifice everything to protect innocent life. The Council's own member species were beginning to ask why they had kept such natural guardians isolated. Ambassador Krelth received new instructions from the Council leadership. Establish formal diplomatic contact with humanity. The galaxy needed to understand these Deathworlders better. More importantly, the galaxy needed to know what would and would not trigger human intervention. Admiral Chen was reviewing casualty reports when the diplomatic request reached her flagship. Human losses had been minimal, but the psychological impact on her crews had been significant. Many of her people were struggling to process what they had seen in the Scourge conversion chambers. The request for formal diplomatic contact was not unexpected. Chen had known that the galaxy would eventually have to deal with humanity's new role as protector. The question was whether other species would accept human guardianship or try to resist it. "Commander Hayes," she called to her second-in-command, "send a response to the Galactic Council. Tell them we are willing to establish diplomatic relations, but make it clear that our primary concern will always be the protection of innocent life." "Should we mention any specific conditions, Admiral?" Chen thought about this for a moment. "Tell them that any species that preys on defenseless beings will be considered an enemy of humanity. Any species that needs protection will be considered our responsibility. They can base their diplomatic strategies on that information." As the human fleet prepared to depart for Earth, Veltar stood at an observation window and watched the massive warships move into formation. Each vessel carried enough firepower to destroy a moon, but they had used that power to save her people. The galaxy was about to learn what it meant to have the monsters from the Deathworld as guardians. Some would welcome the protection, others would fear the protectors themselves, but one thing was certain: the universe had changed. Innocent beings now had champions who would cross any distance and face any threat to keep them safe.